What's up, guys? This is going to be episode 5 of Strategies and Tips for Betting MMA. I'm just going to kind of go through a fight today and give you guys kind of the process I go through when I'm going to make a bet, or, when the lines drop, how I go about choosing the fights that I'm going to bet on. And then kind of when I do narrow it down, some of the quick things that I look for when I do know both fighters. So when the lines drop, guys, we all know how it looks, right? You got the whole new card out, a ton of new fighters. Well, not new fighters necessarily, but a ton of new matchups and a ton of new options to make bets. And it can be overwhelming sometimes because, multiple events will drop. So you might see a fight night drop, and then Bellator will drop. And all of a sudden, you got 20 fights to bet on. And then KSW will drop, and the following week's UFC card will drop, and now there's 40 fights to bet on. So sometimes it's just overwhelming. The parlay options are crazy, and you really just gotta break it down slowly, card by card, and just look at the names that stand out. And that's the first step, guys. When you see the line, of course, look at the names that stand out to you. Now, once you've done that, what you need to do then is determine if you know the opponent and how much you know, right? So once you have that fighter that you've narrowed down, okay, I like this guy, he's up and coming, hungry, I like his trajectory, now who's he fighting, right? And do you know enough about that fighter to say whether it's a good or bad matchup for the name that you like? If you don't, you have to do the research, right? Whether that means you're going to listen to the other predictors who do breakdowns and, kind of get everybody's opinion. Whether that means you're going to go on Fight Pass and watch their library of fights, or you're just going to go on YouTube and see what you can see on there. Or you're just going to go by the interviews and Fight Week and things like that. There's different ways to go about doing it, but the best way is just to use all three and as much information as you can get. So once you have that fighter narrowed down and you have done some research to, determine the opponent, whether they're a good matchup, a couple other things that you want to do is decide whether the line is good, whether the value on that fighter is good, and whether you think that it will increase or decline. So let me give you an example. For Covington here, he started off at about 250. In my opinion, those lines are going to decline because it's a lot closer to a pick'em, right? So if you see a fighter, another example recently was Kevin Lee. That was last weekend's card. Kevin Lee opened up at a 2.5 as well. Those, to me, shouldn't be like that, right? So I think the bookie has, made a mistake in the value he saw on those fighters. So then you have to determine whether you want to place the bet now or wait. So again, in the cases where you feel like it's going to decline, you pull the trigger right away. In cases that you want to put max bets and a lot of money, you might want to wait just because you're not going to have, you're not going to be able to put a ton of money on a fight right when the lines drop. So there will be less of a limit. You won't be able to put down as much. But I still like to get on the lines and just drop at least, a nice chunk right away. And then secondly, if you do wait, and a good example of that would be, again, Stephen Thompson, I mentioned in the last video. He started up at about 1.7 when the lines opened. And because he got knocked out by Pettis and I didn't like his chin, or I didn't trust it yet, I didn't think 1.7 was enough. But when he got to 1.9, later in the week, I did think that there was value there. So I jumped on it. And of course it cashed. So you have to just really be careful about just the value. Make sure that you're getting your money's worth. And if you do feel like you could get more out of it, hold off. And if you don't, and you think, okay, wow, this is too good to be true, jump on it right away. And that kind of goes without saying. If it's too good to be true, jump on it. But a lot of people, see the lines and think that they'll stay like that, and they don't. If you notice that the line's off, get it right away. And then another thing, guys, is, it's never a good idea to look at a fight on paper. So going into a website like this, let me just give you an example here. Just bear with me as I scroll down. We'll look at the main event, and you would, for example, go in, click on the tail of the tape, and then first off, just look at how they match up, right? So you look at their reach and their height and their size and stuff like that to see if the one guy's a lot bigger than the other or has an advantage there. Then you're also going to look at the teams, right? You see Colby's American Top Team, which is a big thing. Whenever I see ATT, that means a lot. It's probably the best gym in the world, in my opinion, right now. And then you'll go down, and this is where it can get kind of misleading. When you go into the fighter and you go and look at the records, it is okay to go and look, especially for experience, the level of competition that they fought, but also the type of way that they've been winning. Now, if you look here with Colby, there's a lot of decisions on here, right? Last time he got a finish was in 2016 against Max Griffin by ground and pound in the third. Same thing with the fight before that, Jonathan Munier, third round. So he's, able to take his fights to the distance, and he has good cardio and things like that, but not a big finisher. So, it's not a red flag if they're not getting a lot of finishes, guys. I actually do want to see some decisions on their record, just so I know that they can go the distance, and cardio won't be an issue. So the thing I want to say, though, is just don't go solely on this, because it doesn't mean a whole lot for the next fight. It does, as far as, they've seen a lot in the octagon, the experience, the type of fighters and level of competition that they faced, all plays a big part into making the bet. But I just want to, make a point of saying that it's not the only thing. You do need to take tape into account. So that said, guys, in this fight, I also want to say, a lot of people aren't going to like my opinion because of the fact that he's not a fan favorite, and because of the fact that he said a lot of things, and he's a Trump supporter, and all these things that make him a heel and make him a hated fighter in the UFC. But the thing is, I don't care about whether I like the fighter or not when I'm making a bet. I never pick based off of who I like or who I want to win. I go off of who I think is going to win. And in this case, I feel that Colby has a pretty good chance, and more so than the bookies are giving him. So I am going to take a shot on Colby, and I do think he can get it done. Now, I do feel Guzman might have the strength advantage. Now, we've seen Colby talk a lot about Ipo, and if anybody knows what that is, or who doesn't know what that is, I should say, Dillashaw was busted on Ipo, and basically it just gives you a decent, or has the potential to give you a decent cardio boost. And Colby did point out that he has heard that 100% Usman's on it, and there's a difference between when he fought Emil Meek, where he gassed out in 3 rounds. He did win that fight, though. And then all of a sudden he was able to go hard 5 with Woodley. So maybe a little bit to be said for that, but cardio can be improved, so you don't want to, assume too much. But that said, you can't think that, everything is what it is all the time. You can't always give the benefit of the doubt. Some guys will abuse the system, so be aware. And look at the records, though, guys. 15-1, both on nice winning streaks, both good wrestlers. Thing is, though, I think Colby has the stand-up advantage. We saw what he did to Robbie Lawler, broke a record for strikes. He's also beat Rafael Dos Anjos. Just some really staple fighters for the divisions that he was in. To be able to do that to Robbie is really impressive. Maia, the grappling wizard of the division, and Robbie, striking record on the most dangerous striker in the division. So he's done some really impressive things, regardless if you like him or not. And he's trying to get people to want to watch him, whether they hate him or they love him. He wants people to buy the pay-per-views that he's on, because he gets a piece of the pay-per-view. So if people want to see him get his ass kicked, they're going to tune in. And that's what happens. He makes people want to see him get his ass kicked. Now, he doesn't sell it as well as a guy like Chael sells it, and he definitely comes off a bit annoying sometimes. but I don't give a shit about all that. I'm more about the odds and making the money. And I do feel like he has the tools to get it done and will get it done against Guzman. So I am putting a bet on Colby, based off of not just the fact that, I think the stand-up's better. There's a lot of factors. I also think, and this goes into the bet, placing a bet as well, the interviews, the way he's talking, the way his coaches talk about how hard he works, how everybody says he's always in the gym. You might hear a lot of people talking shit about him being in the gym, but he's always in the gym. And just the confidence level. So the interviews becomes a part of it as well. What mindset they're in. Part of fighting, a massive part of fighting, is the mindset. So you really got to be aware of that as well, guys. Are they ready for the fight? Is their brain in the right space? Because if not, and you're getting off track thinking about the wrong things, that can cost you a lot in a fight like this, especially when you got a guy like Colby with the potential to be talking shit to you for a long time to come, embarrass you. So Kamaru is definitely going to be feeling the pressure coming into this one. I think Colby's going to use that to his advantage, and it should be a good fight. Does Kamaru have the ability to win? Absolutely. If he does have the strength advantage like I feel he does, and he's able just to use that just to grind like he did with Woodley, it is what it is. I just feel like Colby has the tools to use defensive wrestling to keep him off, as well as the stand-up to accumulate the points. So I did go through the steps with this fight as well, though. Even though I know both fighters pretty well, I did still take the line movement into account, and I did think that Colby would or was at the best price he was going to be at, so I pulled the trigger. So that was the assessing the lines part of things. Then I also did watch the last fight from each of them, even though I remember how dominant Colby was. I watched a couple of his last fights. Same with Guzman. And then, you set the probability. Now that's what we're going to get into here. I think it's probably 55-45 for me for Covington. So there is that advantage on the bookie, about a 0.45 if you're looking at it with that cap. Some people might say they give it 60-40 Usman, and I wouldn't be mad at that, right? It's all within 10 or 15%, so there is a bit of value there either way. But I like the value on Colby. I do think he's going to win by decision. Pretty clear-cut decision. Now, of course, Usman does have the tools, but I want it to be, I want to be a definitive pick. I don't want to be on the fence here, so we're going to say Colby by decision here. And I feel like we've accumulated enough of an advantage to call it beating the bookie. And that's the main thing when placing the bet. The final thing after the studying the tape, assessing the lines, determining whether you think they're going to move or not, setting the probability, is did you beat the bookie? Do you feel like you're all around having the advantage? Are you happy with the bet? That's always the last thing you want to ask yourself before you hit that place bet button. Is this a nice bet? And if you look at it and say, yeah, Dan, I like this. This is nice. Those odds are nice. I feel good about it. You can hit place bet. Because at that point, guys, either way, you should be happy with the outcome. I mean, I should take that back. If your bet loses, you should be accepting of it. You should be okay with it because you were happy with the bet. If you were on the fence, those are the bets that are going to burn the most. Always be happy and confident with your bet. And if you lose, you lose, right? There is going to be losing nights, guys. I'm always going to get back into that as well because we're not always going to win. Right now, we're on a 4-week winning streak. I'm up a good amount. Last weekend, I had a great weekend. But next weekend might not be the same. The weekend after that might not be the same. Might have gone 4 straight, but now we might go two L's. Of course, I hope not. And as far as things go, the odds say that won't happen, but it can. And you always have to take that into account. We're in Russia coming up this Saturday. There could be a ton of robberies. And that's another brutal thing that you really got to be thinking about these days as well, guys. Robberies in the MMA are prevalent. They're fucking everywhere. And it's getting worse by the week. It really, truly is. You never want to, put a ton of money into a fight that could go to a decision, especially in a foreign country, because there's robberies, and Russians robbing American fighters in Russia is highly likely. Now, not in this fight, but on that card, right? This isn't going to play a part, which I like. Um, but, you know, we're going to get a really good fight on this 245 card. We're going to get 3 title fights. But in my opinion, this is the most value, and it's Colby Covington. So I just wanted to let you guys know kind of what I do before I'm placing a bet. Now, when it's up and comers where there's a bit less of a lean or less confident, it's still kind of the same process, just a lot more work, right? So again, as I always do, guys, I just want to reiterate some of the steps. The first thing you want to do when the lines drop is just look for those names that pop out. And then you want to, assess the opponent. Once you feel like it's a really good matchup, you want to assess the lines. Are you getting good value? And then, of course, you want to determine whether you think those lines are going to move, or if you should wait, right? Like, should you place a bet right away because the value is really good and it stood out to you not only for the fighter's name, but because the lines are off? Of course, you want to jump on that right away. If you feel like there's not really enough value in that fighter, obviously you want to hold off till you can get the maximum value. Especially if you're spending big amounts, guys, it definitely can add up, even a few points. So determining whether the lines are going to move is important. Of course, you want to study the experience of both fighters, who they fought. Of course, watch the tape, last few fights, and then set your probability. So again, 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. And then, are you beating the bookie? Do you have an advantage? And before you hit that place bet button, are you confident? All those things, if you check those boxes, guys, it's a huge thing. It will definitely improve your win rate. It definitely will. If you're checking the boxes on all those things and you're not just jumping in, looking at the lines and clicking bet and spending a ton of money that way, I promise you in the long run, you will win money. This is all a system for long-term success. It's all about the long run with this, guys. It's about building. Your account should never hit zero again. It should only go up. Chunks might come out of that profit. You might have, like I said, losing weeks, and you might knock big parts of that bankroll off and knock it down. But as long as you're building at the end of the year, you look at that and you've made a substantial amount. That's what it's all about. So that's what we're aiming for here, guys. And Covington, in my opinion, is a good bet. So as much as people might hate and not like that, it is what it is. I don't bet on who I like or who I want to win. I bet on who I think is going to win based on the skill. So I do feel like Colby has the tools to get it done here, even though Guzman is, extremely strong, great wrestler. I just feel like Colby has the toolbox here to get it done. So a bet is placed on him. Those are some of the tricks or some of the steps that I go through in placing a bet, guys. Of course, I will be putting up more strategies videos, Bellator coming up, as well as the post weigh-ins for UFC. So I'll see you guys on those videos, and I appreciate you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.